Hello everyone, welcome to my review of Season 5, Episode 3 of Arrow, titled A Matter of Trust. Before I go any further, I just want to warn everyone there will be spoilers in this review. As the title suggests in this episode, trust plays a big part in the episode. It plays a part in the flashbacks as well as in the present when Oliver is dealing with assembling his new team. As we saw from the previous episode, he has this new team in place, he is training them, and now it's time for him to start trusting them, and for them to start trusting him as well. As we saw in this episode, there's trust issues. Wild Dog and Artemis decide to go out on their own and do some reconnaissance. But of course, that leads into them doing more than reconnaissance. They end up getting in a fight with a drug-making crew, and stop me if you've heard this before, one of the main villains of this drug-running crew falls into a vat of chemicals, making him a supervillain. Surprise, surprise. Going out and doing some innocent reconnaissance led to a whole lot more problems. It's nice to see that once again the flashbacks are playing a role in the episode. They are playing a role in the main plot line where we're seeing how Oliver was having to learn how to trust the other members of the Bratva, and in doing so he now has to take what he learned back then and apply it now. It's a nice kind of companion piece with the main plot line. As well as having complications with Team Arrow, Oliver is also having complications as mayor. As we've seen from the previous episode, I think this is going to be a running problem throughout the season. An interesting aspect of Oliver being mayor is that I'm noticing that he is surrounding himself with people that he knows and people that he trusts, which is very interesting because it is probably going to lead to a lot of public backlash. Because if you know in the real world, when politicians start appointing their friends or people they know into important roles, that leads to a lot of negative things. Thea, for all I know, is not well equipped to be his chief of staff, but it's his sister and it's someone he knows. What if one day he has to fire her for whatever reason? I know in this episode she wanted to resign because of the whole approaching Quentin Lance about being deputy mayor thing. And at the end of this episode, he actually goes ahead and appoints him deputy mayor anyway. And I'm wondering, what if Quentin Lance is not up to this challenge? I mean, yes, he is. He is now known as an alcoholic has-been, for the lack of better terms. So I am wondering what is going to happen when it comes to Oliver being a mayor, because being a mayor specifically of Star City is probably not an easy thing, and we're seeing that it is becoming increasingly more difficult for Oliver to balance his role as the Green Arrow, his role as team leader of this new Team Arrow, and now as also mayor, where things are mounting up. And that is when we get an interesting addition to the show in Adrian Chase, who is the lawyer for the mayor, I guess, perhaps attorney general of some kind. If you've been keeping up with the news in between the seasons, you know that this Adrian Chase character is going to become the comic book character Vigilante. Vigilante is kind of just what his name suggests. He is a vigilante. He was a character who was introduced in the comics way back in 1983 in the famous New Teen Titans run by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. So it's going to be very interesting to see them now once again incorporate another new character into the fold. We already got the new characters with Team Arrow, with Artemis, Wild Dog, and Ragman, who is now a main part of Team Arrow. But I'm not sure how much further he's going to be a main part of Team Arrow, because, as we saw at the end of this episode, Felicity decided to finally come forward and tell him that she is the one who sent the bomb towards his town towards the end of last season. Is he going to want to continue working with Team Arrow, knowing that they are essentially the ones responsible for the death of everyone he knew and loved? I have to say, just from a team perspective, he's kind of useful to have around. He is one of the only members of Team Arrow that actually has superhero powers, so he's kind of a nice addition to the team. a different edition than we've seen in the past, where these have kind of just been regular humans who have been trained in some type of martial arts. Speaking of the team, it was very nice to see them kind of out in the first official foray, with all of them having their costumes, all of them teaming up together and working together to take on a common enemy. I really like that we are finally getting to see Curtis in his entire Mr. Terrific costume. It was a nice mention in the episode, his inspiration for it, but the one thing I have to question is, why are you sparring and training with a leather jacket on? That cannot be comfortable to do. We really need to start getting more tactical suits when it comes to some of these other characters, because these guys are just in training. They are not, I would say, fully fledged, ready to go members yet. So they really need more protective suits than just, a leather jacket or a leather vest or stuff like that. I think Ragman's claw probably doubles as an offensive and defensive thing, so I think he's covered there. But for someone like Wild Dog, I don't think a hockey mask and whatever else he's wearing is going to be sufficient in protecting him out there. I've also questioned that about Oliver over the seasons, but by this point, you kind of have to assume that Oliver can protect himself in other ways. While we're on the topic of Team Arrow members, we did get a follow-up to what happened to John Diggle from last episode. He is now being held in, I assume, a military prison with all kind of trumped-up framing charges that obviously aren't real, but he is also going through a psychological existential crisis where he is seeing visions of Floyd Lawton as Deadshot. John Diggle is struggling with the death of his brother, specifically because it was of his own doing. And while I was watching that go down last season, there were constant times where I was like, you have to kill your brother. He is far past saving. He is now attacking you. He's attacking your family. He's attacking your friends. He is beyond the point of saving. So when John finally made that decision, I was happy about it. But now we are seeing the repercussions of it for his character. At the end of the episode, Lila approaches Oliver to enlist him in helping them break John out of this military prison. So for the next episode, I assume that it's going to be a lot like Prison Break, where we are going to get an elaborate scheme of trying to break John out of prison. What happens after that remains to be seen, because I assume if they are successful in that, he's going to have to be hidden underground somewhere until he can be cleared free of the charges, and that opens up an entire new plot line that they're probably going to have to go down regarding his character. Overall, I would say it was a decent episode of Arrow. There were some things in there that I felt were kind of just very generic, like the villain that they had to fight. I understand why he was in the episode. You needed him so that the team could come together and fight this common enemy, so it worked well in that sense, but he was kind of just another villain of the week, nameless guy that we really don't need to care about going forward. This has been my review of Season 5, Episode 3 of Arrow, titled A Matter of Trust. If you like this video, please check out my other episode reviews for other superhero television series.